Let's say China.
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 China. China. China.
There are next door neighbors, and you can actually see Russia from land here in Alaska.
Go over to China. China.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Trump statement, tweeting out insults to Angela Merkel. What's he doing?
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host.
Yes. Hello, and welcome. I am James Andrews, and you are listening to So This Happened, the only news you need if you are the proud owner of a sex doll. It's Monday, the 18th of September 2017, and today we're going to jump right in with sex dolls. Now, if you're a frequent listener of the program, you will know that I am somewhat obsessed with sex dolls. I find them intriguing, for want of a better word. Anyway, a Chinese company offered a sex doll rental service. The service was suspended after just a few days, and, well, I have an idea why that might be. The company goes by the name of Touch, which is, I suppose, quite appropriate. They operate out of Beijing, and they started on Thursday. And today, Monday, they have gone out of business. Now, the company is insisting that it's not because it's vulgar and it was just weird letting lots of people have sex with rubber dolls. They're just insisting that, it's really hard in China to have a business that provides sex dolls to needy Chinese businessmen. Well, I could think of one or two more reasons why you wouldn't necessarily want to have a company that rents out sex dolls. And my favourite part about this whole story is that the company had 10 sex dolls for rent, and they varied from Chinese-looking, a Korean-looking, a Russian-looking women, and this is the creme de la creme. They had one that was a character of Wonder Woman, complete with a sword and a shield. And I can only imagine what people may have done with that sword. That's it. That's all I have on that one. So anyway, you can no longer rent a sex doll if you go to Beijing. If that was something that you had on your bucket list, sort of rent a sex doll, you can't do that anymore. But you never know, somebody may spring up another company that rents out sex dolls. It takes all sorts, I suppose. And that was some cool robot sex sounds playing in the background, don't you think? And now from sex dolls to Mother Nature. I don't know, you try and come up with a segue from sex dolls to Mother Nature. It's impossible. Hurricane Maria is a Category 4 hurricane currently, and she is barreling down on the Caribbean again. Those poor folks just cannot get a break. Now, in less than 24 hours, Maria has gone from a tropical storm to a Category 4 hurricane. The damage that this could cause could be absolutely massive, and from islands that are already suffering from that bastard Harvey, who hit them just last week. Now, Puerto Rico is directly in the path of Maria, and they are buckling down right now for what could potentially be a Category 5 hurricane when it reaches land. Now, Puerto Rico has not been hit by a Category 4 or a Category 5 hurricane since 1928. So this is going to be a real test for them, and lots of good vibes going that way, because it's going to be an awful time, I think. And shifting gears slightly, we're going to move over to the United Nations, where Donald Trump today gave a small speech at the opening, and he essentially, surprised some people because he's derided the UN in the past considerably, saying they're completely pointless and useless. Today's message from him seemed to be sort of let's make the United Nations great. Not great again, because he doesn't think they've ever been great, but he thinks they could possibly be great.
We seek a United Nations that regains the trust of the people around the world. In order to achieve this, the United Nations must hold every level of management accountable, protect whistleblowers, and focus on results rather than on process. To honor the people of our nations, we must ensure that no one and no member state shoulders a disproportionate share of the burden, and that's militarily or financially. We also ask that every peacekeeping mission have clearly defined goals and metrics for evaluating success. They deserve to see the value in the United Nations, and it is our job to show it to them. We encourage the Secretary General to fully use his authority to cut through the bureaucracy, reform outdated systems, and make firm decisions to advance the UN's core mission. Further, we encourage all member states to look at ways to take bold stands at the United Nations with an eye toward changing business as usual and not being beholden to ways of the past which were not working.
So there was the president today giving a speech which surprised a lot of people, because there was sort of a fear that he would just come out and say the UN is irrelevant in this day and age. He certainly didn't do that. He did say it's never been great and it doesn't really do its job. Now, I think there are probably millions of people around the world who have benefited from the UN who would say, well, I'm not sure they're entirely crap, Donald. But this is definitely a step in the right direction for Donald Trump. He's actually talking to the UN now and saying, let's work on making this great. Now, whether or not it already is great is sort of up for debate, I suppose. But the fact that the President of the United States is now engaging the UN and saying, okay, let's see if we can make this work, that's a positive thing, people. That is a very positive thing. And what else is Donald Trump saying this week at the UN? Well, he's making a few Donald Trump-sized claims, particularly on Israel and Palestine, where after a meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Donald Trump said that there was a good chance of a peace agreement. So we're working very hard on it. We'll see what happens. Historically, people can't say it happened. I say it can happen. Well, look, we all want peace in the Middle East, right? I mean, that would be great. Whether Donald Trump can do that or not is probably unlikely, particularly since Jared Kushner is the sort of envoy to sort out the whole Israeli-Palestinian thing. You sort of get the idea that Donald Trump just said, oh, wait, you know what? My son-in-law, he's Jewish, isn't he? Send him to Israel. They're all Jews over there, aren't they? Well, Donald, the Palestinians aren't. They're not. No. Fuck. Well, send Jared anyway. He's a Jew. It'd be great. The president is also very critical of the 2015 deal between Iran and the US and other world powers, including China and Russia. Now, this was designed to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. And Donald Trump has said, in typical Donald Trump fashion, that he will unveil what he's going to do very soon. That's a direct quote. Very soon. Stay tuned to The Trump Show next week. We're sorting out Iran. And of course, North Korea is going to be a big part of the UN discussions this week. Donald Trump is putting additional pressure on the Chinese President, Xi Jinping, to really commit to holding up the sanctions against North Korea. Now, the sanctions don't really seem to be working. Kim Jong-un's just said, well, fuck it, I'm just going to make nuclear weapons anyway. You can't stop me. The man-child, right? But that is going to be something to watch this week. Now, also on the list of things to talk about is global warming. There was sort of a news report earlier last week that Donald Trump maybe was going to reverse his decision on the Paris Climate Accord. Well, that turned out not to be true, and the White House doubled down on the fact that no, the US is definitely pulling out of the climate accord. Now, Donald Trump met with French President Emmanuel Macron, who seems to be his new best friend today, and Macron strongly defends the climate agreement. And we'll see if him and Trump talked about anything today that makes Donald kind of go, ooh, you know what, maybe it's not such a bad idea anyway. And if you're thinking that Macron's influence on Trump isn't that strong, well, check this out. Donald Trump also announced today that he wants to hold a 4th of July celebration in Washington, D.C., very similar to the one he experienced on Bastille Day when he was in France visiting Macron and his wife. So maybe, just maybe, Emmanuel Macron said, hey, Donald, you know you're going to do that whole Bastille thing in the 4th of July thing in the USA, right? Yeah, well, maybe, since you loved Paris so much and you love what we're doing, maybe you could have another look at the Paris Climate Agreement. We can change it to Bastille Day Climate Agreement if that makes it easier for you. I'm fine with that. We can call this the Bastille Day Climate Agreement. You up for that one? But anyway, this UN meeting this week is a really big deal. The US is such a massive part of the UN. They have a huge amount of influence over it. Now, the UN has already cut its budget by more than $500 million. And that is directly because Donald Trump said, you need to do that if the US is going to stay within the United Nations. So the president holds a huge amount of power and sway over what happens in the UN. And today was seen by most people as good news because in the past Donald Trump has rebuked the UN so strongly. A tweet from 2016 read, "The United Nations has such great potential, but right now it is just a club for people to get together, talk and have a good time. So sad." Now, I don't know whether he was confusing Mar-a-Lago with the UN in that tweet. Maybe he was. Maybe he wasn't. But today, he really only mildly rebuked the UN. And that I can only see as a silver lining in the dark cloud of Donald Trump's presidency thus far. And now, moving on to my favourite punching bag state. And I apologise if you reside in this state. But we are going to move on to Alabama, the great redneck state of Alabama. Today, the Republican frontrunner in next week's special Senate election, Roy Moore, made what can only be described as a racially insensitive comment. I'll read it to you. "We have blacks and whites fighting, reds and yellows fighting, Democrats and Republicans fighting, men and women fighting." Well, first off, what kind of a fucked up state is Alabama? Everybody's just fighting apparently. Men are fighting women, women are fighting women, women are fighting men, Republicans are fighting Democrats, blacks are fighting whites, and reds are fighting yellows. And in this day and age, well, in any day and age really, but particularly in 2017, to refer to people as reds and yellows it's fucked up. There really is no other word for it, is it? Now, Roy Moore is one of those interesting politicians who really wanted to be a Southern Baptist preacher, I feel. He has suggested in the past that September 11th was God's punishment for the nation turning away from him. Turning away from God, not turning away from Roy Moore. And just so you can hear what kind of a backwards person Alabama is thinking to elect as their senator, here is the infamous speech that Roy Moore gave when he referred to people as reds and yellows. Now, I will give you a warning before I play this. I can only understand about every third word he's saying. Now, you might have better luck, so we'll see how it goes. So, ladies and gentlemen, the esteemed Roy Moore.
Washington said long ago that if you ignore virtue and morality, you will shake the foundations of this country. It was virtue or morality which is the necessary spring of popular government. Who that is a sincere friend to it can look with indifference on attempts to shake the foundation of the fabric. Our foundation has been shaken. Our road is clear. We've got to go back. There's time in our history where we did. One such time was war between the states. And we were fighting, our nation was torn. Is our nation torn today? You know that we were torn apart in the Civil War. Brother against brother, North against South, party against party. What's changed? Now we got blacks and whites fighting, reds and yellows fighting, Democrats and Republicans fighting, men and women fighting. What's going to unite us? What's going to bring us back together?
So there he was, Senate hopeful from Alabama, Roy Moore. And on that ridiculous note, we're going to end the show today. Thanks very much for joining the conversation. It was fun as always. We will do this again tomorrow. Have a great evening and take care.